Southeastern Coal Company opened the Willow Grove Mine in 1917. It was located 12 miles west of Wheeling, West Virginia, and 4 miles south of St. Clairsville, Ohio. Hanna Coal Company leased the mine from Southeastern in 1932 and acquired it by deed in 1941. Machinery was installed which updated the mine to one of the best equipped in the state of Ohio. It was considered a model mine and one of the safest in the nation, employing 711 men. Yet, on a Saturday morning, March 16, 1940, an explosion took the lives of 72 miners. The mine resumed operation after the disaster until its closing in 1954.
I'm a third-generation coal miner. My dad was a miner, and his dad was a miner. Back in them days, that's where the jobs were, in the coal mines or the steel mills. I got hired in 1967, and I worked in Nelms No. 1, Cadiz, Ohio. It was known as the Deep Shaft Mine. We were 580 feet down.
I originally came from Pennsylvania. And when I got married, and my wife's brother, he worked at Willow Grove. He put my name in, that's how I got to work. Then I was on a construction crew. The shaft that went down to Willow Grove, we had to gunite it and repair it and everything before they put the elevator down there. I was the nozzle man that gunnited, you know.
There was a lot of jobs related to coal, you know, the bolts that they used to put in to secure the roof. That was bolts that were made in Harmony Die and Tool. The steel mills were producing the steel to make the bolts. The rock dust, the rails, the wooden ties for the belts, the rubberized belts that carried the coal. It just goes on, the domino effect of other jobs that was created for the coal. And then once the coal was created and taken out of the mine, it was sold to the coal-fired power plants.
In 1935, something very significant happened at Willow Grove Mine. We had, for the first time probably in history, and maybe never since then, the First Lady of the United States, Eleanor Roosevelt, visited the mine, and she went underground. And there's this historic picture of her when she came out of the mine. And she was asked about how to make the mine safer. And she said something that the UMWA has always agreed with. She said there's only two ways to make the mine safer in this country: legislation and unionization. And that was true in 1935, and it's true today. And I wish we had more people in positions of power saying things like that. The Willow Grove Mine was recognized at that point in time in 35 as well as 1940 as one of the safest mines in the country. Mechanization had started early in 1940 at this particular mine, so you had equipment that did a lot of the work that used to be done by miners, so you had fewer miners. With fewer miners, the likelihood of disasters was reduced. The number of people who might die in a mine explosion was reduced. In March of 1940, a horrendous explosion took place, claiming the lives of 72 miners. And so many of these situations go unreported in history. If you ask somebody in California about Willow Grove, they wouldn't know what you were talking about.
You know, you always knew the history of the mine growing up. I found that after I was married, my wife's uncle, Uncle Andy, spent years in working in the coal industry. I found out later in talking to him that him and his brother, or maybe two of his brothers, were in the mine at the time. And in fact, he was asked by the Coal Museum in Harrison County, where he was from, to draw a map, a diagram of the mine at the time, and that's in the coal museum up there, and it's really amazing to go and look and see the detail he was able to diagram where he was, where his brothers were. They all made it out safely. He donated a bunch of material and information to the museum. To hear him tell about it was incredible, and your heart breaks for the families who lost members in that disaster. And fortunately, I didn't have anyone that was there, but as I said, the community of Neffs and the surrounding area, when one hurts, we all hurt, and I think that's what sticks with me the most on remembering the tragedy.
The theory was it was a bad shot, what they call. They had set off a powder shot at the face to break the coal up. And the rock dust wasn't sufficient, and once the blast went off, it suspended the fine coal dust in the air, and it ignited the coal dust, and there was gas in the area. So the combination of the two, it created a fireball, and it was such an explosion that the men, most of them were killed instantly from the concussion of the explosion. There were several miners that got out. One was on the motor, and the story goes that he had the motor on the full control heading out on the rails, and he made it out of the mine, and he was all slumped over on the motor itself, but he survived. And several of the miners, I believe, was on the rescue team, and they perished because of carbon monoxide. The ventilation wasn't sufficient.
I remember 60 years ago, on the way to school, we lived out Pipe Creek. Ambulance was following the bus, and all the kids were all excited, say, you know what happened? Something must have happened to mine. I remember my buddy sat next to me. His dad was a widower, and he said, you know, Ray, I hope that's not my dad. He's the only person I have left. You know, this happened 60 years ago, and it's as bad now as it was then. But it was his dad. But I seen what he went through, you know, passed from one relative to the other. And I imagine out of the 72 men there, how many little boys or girls went through the same thing. But that's why this meant so much to me.
It was a cold March morning, and the miner got up to go to his job. Kissed his wife, told her he loved her, went to the job site. In a blink of an eye, the wife became a widow. His children became orphans. Terrible things when the mine blew up and all the lives that was taken. It took a lot of fatalities before Congress finally acted. The Farmington mine explosion was probably the one that did it. 70, I believe, or 78 men died in that explosion. And finally, Congress acted, and we got safety laws in the mines. They repaired the mine after the explosion, Willow Grove, and it went on until 1954, I believe. They worked it out somewhat, but yeah, it was a big employment for people back in the day. You know, the coal mines and the steel mills, they were big jobs for people who didn't have college education. You know, you could go to work. I call it grunt work, but you could go to work and make a decent living for your family.
A few years before we had the first one, District 6 had a memorial service of sorts. We went and put a wreath down there at the memorial site. Then we went to the church in Neffs, and for a dinner, there was a gentleman there that got up and spoke and said how disappointed he was in the community for not taking care of something. His father was killed in that accident. What it boiled down to is it was everybody's job or nobody's job, so it was time to do something.
Back a few years, one of my friends, union brother, got interested in the Willow Grove mine site. We didn't even know where it was, actually. So he got with our state representative, Jack Serra, and Jack was able to get us a lifetime lease on the acres where the mine actually was.
I talked to Rick and talked to Jack. I went down to clear it up to see what we could do, what the site looked like. Against the advice of my wife, I went down with a weed eater and a push mower, and I couldn't even walk through it. And there was a gentleman lived out the road, a Mr. Barnes, and he stopped and said, "Buddy, what are you trying to do here?" And I said, "Well, we'd like to put a memorial here." He said, "You can't do that with that push mower." I said, "Yeah, I guess you're right." So he went and got his tractor and a brush hog, and he brush hogged it. I mean, the weeds were almost as high as I am, but it just showed the dedication that the community had for the project.
Ray Wright, who is the financial secretary for Local Union 1785, contacted me trying to clean up the Willow Grove site. If you haven't been prior to this to the Willow Grove site, it was truly a weed-infested dump. And in that, Ray and I talked, and Ray contacted Jack Serra. He was the Ohio representative. And without Jack moving the Department of Forestry for the state of Ohio, we wouldn't be where we're at today.
Well, I was contacted by Ray and Mel and Debbie about the project, contacted our office. Of course, I'm happy enough and was proud enough and lucky enough to have a person that worked in my office, and Pam always made sure that she kept us on track. That started the role that we played at that time. Although my history with the project, found a picture not long ago where I was at a ceremony at the old Willow Grove site prior to the reclamation of the site, which the state had done with the old gob piles and the old buildings. I remember speaking at that. It was one of the anniversaries, I forget what year. So my involvement in knowing about the site goes clear back. You know, when I was contacted by the mine workers, I was proud to help them put a project together.
I really was skeptical at first, and then when JAG came on board, Ohio Department of Forestry came on, there was light. And you could see that there was the potential to turn that area into something that not just the mine workers, but the people who reside in that area and the people whose family passed away in that area had a chance to be honored.
In order to have access to the property, it really helped that the state of Ohio had ownership of the property. You know, it was a reclaimed mine site. I think, as Ray said earlier, it really had just grown up with weeds everywhere. So having the site owned by ODNR and then the development of the forestry division taking over not only where the site is, but other properties, it made it a lot easier, I think, to be able to move forward with the project. If it had been a private owner, it might have been more difficult. So you know, you thank the department and the division for having the foresight and the understanding of the significance of the project enough to be able to and willing to lease and coordinate and help the mine workers putting the site, the memorial site, together.
My part was administratively. You know, we helped put it together. I reached out to President Robertson International, and we had a press release through that, putting together, you know, mail outs to the local unions and to get them to come to be a part of it and to speak there and collectively put it together.
When we started down there, we worked in the mud, me and Brother Ray Wright, and Rick Altman was at the helm.
I believe I contacted Mel. I got some bags of sackcrete, and me and Mel poured a pad, and then me and my brother laid some block I'd gotten from a place in Martins Ferry. I contacted the monument place that originally placed the stone, and they moved it from Belair and moved it out there.
And then we put the flagpole up, and we just kept doing what we could to make something out of nothing. It was a piece of scrub ground before we started mowing it and taking care of it. I think it looks pretty good for what we had to work with the funding that we had, which was at that time nothing. And we are pursuing some financial aids through different organizations so we can build the area up even more.
You know, my involvement was just trying to help the people that really did the work, all the mine workers, and Ray and Mel and Debbie and local people that helped with the project. I think the fact that it had been a reclaimed site that the state owned, that the Department Division of Forestry being involved really helped, not only in being able to access the property and be able to move forward with putting in the memorial there. You know, I don't take credit for very many things, so I don't think my involvement was part of my job.
I guess really I was there every step of the project. I know every time me and Mel worked on it, 90% of the time somebody would stop and say, "What are you doing?" And we told them, they said, "Well, you know, my great uncle worked here, or grandpap died here." It just showed how important it was to the whole community.
Well, we started talking, Ray and Jack and Mel Woods and Debbie. You started to formulate a plan, for a lack of a better way to put it, a vision on what we all saw and the potential. I think we started with a flagpole, and then, you know, we had an Eagle Scout. You know, he's the one who was instrumental on the memorial, and it just kind of escalated, and we started to see the vision. What truly is a labor of love from all of us, a legacy to pass down to the youth. It grew larger and larger, and it's still growing.
The feeling, having grown up with a lot of friends in Neffs, spent a lot of time in Neffs. Actually, Sacred Heart, before it closed, was our family's church. Attended a lot of ceremonies there. It was mentioned about the one program that was done at the church. And I do remember at that ceremony, or one of the anniversaries, of a number of people who had family there that lived out of the area, and they were often asking, and I think I was contacted by a couple of them in my office as a legislator, of why the state doesn't do something to put up a marker or something like that. Historically, it's so significant for the mine workers. It's sacred because of so many of their fellow miners died there. But the families, if you grew up around Neffs, if you knew anything about Neffs, and this stands true today, it is a very close-knit community. And the fact that they would come together and so many people would come to the ceremonies that they would have was not surprising at all. I can only imagine what it was like the day of the tragedy. Knowing how Neffs is, and knowing the community and the churches and the people and how they all came together, it had to have been a very difficult time, but it was also a time that they could rely on each other's families to help get themselves through this terrible tragedy.
It's amazing the amount of people that come there for that memorial service, you know. And as we kept putting things together, we received a bell from the Sacred Heart Church, and the church was shutting down, and the diocese was offering that bell for our memorial site. On the day the mine exploded, they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have sirens, they didn't have this stuff. That bell rang the whole day to let all the community know something terrible has happened. So knowing the history of the bell, we were excited to get that. And we had the community, when we went to move the bell, it was like the field of dreams. People came out of the corn. Everybody showed up that morning. You would not believe how much help we had, you know. And so we all got together and got some equipment. We put the foundation for the bell up, the block, and then we had to put a limestone cap to set the bell on. Well, there was a business in Bridgeport Angelina Stone, who was willing to donate, and they put the stone on top so we could put the bell. They were even there the day we moved the bell to anchor the bell to their stone. It was amazing the amount of people that was reaching out and wanted to be part of it. The community and the people that we've come in contact with over this memorial site, it's amazing. You know, people care. Mostly older people, but we have younger people that they want to learn the history.
First, the Eagle Scout first created the monument. I would go down in Belair and actually see my grandfather's name and even run my fingers across the etching to just feel like I kind of met him in a sense. And as far as the memorial goes, it's really nice. It's a place we can go down and remember the ones that were lost. It gives you a sense of peace. It gives you a sense of pride of what my grandfather did for a living, being a coal miner. I think it hits home a little bit for me. It gives me just a sense of relaxation to go down there and the way they honored these men that passed away that day. My grandfather being included. I've been a part of their memorial service a couple times, got to do some things. I got to read the names last year, which was a big honor for me.
The response from the community was overwhelming. I never would have thought that that little patch of land affected so many people. And not just people, the communities, the businesses, and the families who no longer live in that area but live out of state, and how they monitor what goes on, and through Facebook they comment. This has truly been, for no other way to put it, a labor of love. And the outpouring of the community was immensely beautiful. That is a legacy from my end, just me personally, for the rest of my life. A part of me is on that property, and when people see it, they may not know who I am, but I'm there. And not just me, Jack's there, Ray, Mel, Debbie, we're all there. And for the United Mine Workers of America, this union has always paid tribute to our living veterans, our fallen veterans, and most importantly, we've always paid tribute to the fallen miners, men, women, even children, which is sad. And so our heritage is there. Honor the fallen is what this union in part is about.
Last year, for the first time, we had an event there to remember what happened at Willow Grove. And this year, I had the opportunity to speak there. So now we have what's turning into somewhat of a park, and with a monument there to remember those miners who lost their lives. And with that, I just want to say thank you for everybody that's worked so hard for this to happen. This has been an on-the-ground effort by a lot of people. I know I missed some folks here as I was mentioning names, but thank you for what you've done. This is just truly something that UMWA is proud of, and we're proud of our members in that area. But let me take a moment right now and give high praise to our leadership, both at the local level and at the district/international level in this area. Rick Altman, our Vice President, District 31, Mel and Debbie Woods, for example, have been instrumental in keeping the history of this terrible tragedy alive. And also I'd like to mention Brother Ray Wright for all the work that he's done, particularly here recently and last year, to make this happen.